When Malcolm Ross steps into his Arizona home and finds his grandson Ethan curled up on the living room floor, the house in disarray and washed in an eerie silence, he can taste dread in the back of his throat. Then the boy forces out 3 trembling words, the kind that make Malcolm's mind flash back to his years as a soldier, and the old man's blood runs cold. In that moment, Malcolm understands something horrific has happened, something that will thrust him onto a path he hoped he'd never walk again. This is a story of justice, unbreakable resolve, and the extraordinary measures one man will undertake to shield his family. Before we get started, comment down below where you're tuning in from, and, if you believe good can triumph over evil, give this video a like and subscribe for more stories just like this. The Arizona sun beats mercilessly down on Malcolm Ross's ranch, turning the ground beneath his boots into a simmering griddle. It's an isolated patch of desert land, ringed by a makeshift fence that seems to stretch endlessly until it merges with the horizon. Despite the blistering heat and the dust clinging to every pore of his skin, Malcolm is out by the fence line, hammering in new posts. Age has sprinkled silver into his once dark hair, and old injuries cause him to limp slightly, but he still cuts a commanding figure. Next to him, 10-year-old Ethan attempts to help, hugging a coil of wire. The boy's small face glistens with sweat, yet there's a look of fierce determination that makes Malcolm smile despite the heat. "Hold that steady," Malcolm says in a gentle but firm tone, positioning one end of the wire. Ethan nods, thin arms trembling from the effort to keep it taut. After a final whack with the hammer, Malcolm steps back to inspect the work. "Nice going, buddy," he says with a hint of pride. "You're learning." Ethan grins, eyes bright. "You think I'll ever be as good as you, Grandpa?" Malcolm's lips curve into a small, tired smile. "If you keep working at it, I'm sure you'll surpass me one day." He ruffles the boy's hair, a habit he's had ever since Ethan learned to walk. Hidden behind his words lies the old man's concern about what the future might bring. He wants Ethan to be ready for anything this harsh world might throw at him. Inside the ranch house, Layla Ross, Ethan's 18-year-old sister, is stretched out on the couch, phone in hand, one earbud dangling from her shoulder-length hair. She feels the desert's monotony dragging at her nerves. She's counting the days until she heads off to college in a bustling city, far removed from this quiet, sun-scorched land. Whenever Malcolm suggests she help with chores or at least spend time learning the basics of ranch upkeep, she politely declines, sometimes not so politely. It's not that she dislikes her grandfather. She just can't see how any of this dusty labor or outmoded survival talk fits her vision of the future. Malcolm notices her reluctance, and it gnaws at him. He respects that Layla has her own path, but there's an ever-present worry that she might underestimate the world's dangers. He tries to engage her in conversation, talk about college, or ask if she wants to learn any practical skills, but her answers come back clipped, overshadowed by her fixation on the phone, on the world beyond the ranch. It's late afternoon when Malcolm, wanting to finish repairs before nightfall, drives into the modest town of Burton's Bluff for supplies. Ethan insists on coming along, riding shotgun with a big grin on his face. Layla declines, saying she'd rather stay home and stream music while she still can. The old man doesn't push it. He figures letting her have space might be best for everyone. Burton's Bluff is the kind of place that barely made it onto the map. A single main street with a diner, a general store, a small hardware shop, and a handful of weathered buildings huddling under the Arizona sun. Malcolm parks the truck in front of the hardware store and tells Ethan, "Stay here, bud. I'll just be a minute." Ethan wants to come in, he always does, but Malcolm's firm expression halts any protest. Inside, the store smells of sawdust and metal polish. Malcolm heads down an aisle to pick up nails and fencing tools. That's when he notices raised voices near the register. A teenage clerk, skinny and pale, is being hassled by 3 strangers, 2 men and a woman, all in worn jeans and dark shirts, each sporting tattoos that coil around their arms and necks. One man slams his fist on the counter, shouting about being shortchanged the last time he was here. The clerk stammers, hands shaking, trying to explain it must be a mistake. Malcolm's instincts flare. He can see the tension in the shoulders of the aggressors. In their eyes, he recognizes a spark of cruelty, the kind he encountered too many times in war zones. Quietly he steps closer. Then, in a controlled but piercing voice, he says, "That's enough. Leave him be." The three strangers pivot. Their hostile amusement fades as they size up the older man who stands behind them like a sentinel. Malcolm's weathered face gives little away, though his eyes, sharp and resolute, are enough to make them hesitate. "Mind your own business, old man," the taller man snaps, a bruise near his temple visible under the fluorescent lights. "This doesn't concern you." Malcolm stands firm, nails in one hand, a coil of rope in the other. "Sure looks like you're bullying him. I don't allow that where I come from." The woman scowls, shifting her stance. A jagged symbol that looks like some gang marking peeks out from under her sleeve. "You don't know who you're messing with," she warns. There's venom in her voice. But Malcolm has heard that threat more times than he can count. He simply sets the hardware on a nearby shelf and steps forward. "Let him go," he orders. A smaller, wiry man among the trio tries to appear tough, but he's trembling from pent-up anger. He jerks the clerk forward, nearly toppling the kid. "We're not done with him," he sneers. "He owes us." Before Malcolm can respond, the tall man makes a move, hand dipping toward a concealed blade. Malcolm surges forward, moving surprisingly fast for someone who appears to be in his late 60s. He traps the man's wrist, twisting it away with a precision honed from decades of experience. The blade falls. With a sharp elbow strike, Malcolm sends the tall man reeling into a display of hammers. The woman curses and lunges, but Malcolm hooks her arm and pivots, forcing her off balance. His foot sweeps her leg, and she collapses against the counter, head thumping the edge. The wiry man tries to come at him from behind with a clenched fist. Malcolm spins, deflects the blow, and drives a solid punch into the man's ribs, then another to his jaw. It's over in seconds. The three strangers sprawl on the linoleum floor, dazed and furious. The clerk, eyes bulging, whispers a breathless, "Thank you, sir." Malcolm exhales, scanning the tattoos on the aggressors. His gaze locks on that symbol on the woman's arm. It's something he recognizes from old intelligence reports, rumored to be associated with an emerging cartel. He sets his jaw. "Call the sheriff," he tells the clerk curtly, not removing his eyes from the groaning thugs. "Let them handle the rest." Malcolm leaves without a backward glance, though tension coils in his gut. Outside, Ethan spots the bruise forming on his grandfather's knuckles and asks, "Grandpa, did something happen?" "Nothing that won't blow over," Malcolm says, but his eyes are grim as he grips the steering wheel. As the truck pulls away, the trio of criminals stumble out of the store, glaring after Malcolm's truck. One of them spits, "He'll regret that." The others mutter curses and references to Miguel, or perhaps Mikel, their boss, presumably someone who won't tolerate interference, no matter who it comes from. That evening, the desert sun sinks low, painting the sky in oranges and reds. Malcolm sits on the porch, wearing a deep frown, a rifle leaning within arm's reach. Ethan chases a ball around the yard, oblivious to the tension. Inside, Layla is half listening to Ethan's excited story about how Grandpa took on 3 people at once, but mostly rolling her eyes. When Ethan finally finishes, Layla says flatly, "He shouldn't be fighting. He's old, Ethan. He's not Superman." Ethan scowls. "He's stronger than anyone. He always wins." Layla tries to keep the condescension out of her tone. "He's had training, sure, but that doesn't mean he's invincible." Her words carry a faint worry. She's seen the wariness in Malcolm's posture before, and she knows trouble might be on the horizon. Outside, Malcolm rocks gently on an old wooden chair, gaze distant. The last streaks of sunset fade to twilight. He recalls that tattoo, the savage swirl, and the rumor that this new syndicate is expanding operations in the region. In the pit of his stomach, he senses a storm is coming. A storm that might upend the fragile peace he's built for his grandchildren out here. He's survived many battles, lost good friends along the way, and he knows complacency can be fatal. Somewhere across the desert, under the fluorescent glow of a luxurious mansion's lights, a lean man in a fitted suit listens intently to the 3 bruised thugs. His name is Mikel Suarez, rumored to be a lieutenant for a larger cartel operation, or maybe even higher up. Nobody's sure how the power structure works exactly. He reclines in an armchair, swirling a tumbler of whiskey, eyes narrowed. This old man, he humiliated you? Michael's voice, calm yet edged with steel, makes the trio flinch. We didn't expect, one man begins, only to be cut off by Michael's dismissive hand gesture. The ring on his finger glints menacingly in the light. I don't care about your excuses, Michael says. He challenged our reach. Let's see how tough he is when we send a warning straight to his door. He downs the whiskey in one smooth swallow. You said he has a family, right? That's good leverage. The next afternoon, while Malcolm and Ethan are still out fixing the fence, Layla lingers inside the ranch house, half-heartedly scrolling her phone and daydreaming about college life in the city. She thinks how different that world is, how it hums with lights and energy, so unlike the stillness out here. Suddenly, there's the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. It's not Malcolm's truck. Layla frowns, peering out the window. A black SUV rolls onto the property, its engine rumbling ominously. Layla's pulse spikes. She sets her phone aside, inching toward the porch. The SUV's doors open, and 4 individuals step out, no nonsense in their stance. Each exudes a cold confidence. One, a tall woman with sharp cheekbones, locks eyes with Layla across the yard. She doesn't speak, just strides forward as if the place already belongs to her. Layla tries to sound calm. Who are you? She calls from the porch steps. Her voice wobbles. The woman glances at the others, nods once. They hurry toward the house. Layla's gut screams danger. She retreats inside, yelling, Ethan, Grandpa, but they aren't here. She slams the door and throws the lock, but the wood is old and yields to a powerful kick from one of the intruders. Splinters fly. Layla grabs a chair, swinging it wildly at the first figure through the door, who staggers back. Another seizes her arms, pinning her so fiercely she can't even shout properly. She thrashes in vain, eyes wide with panic. A blow to her ribs forces the air from her lungs. Her phone clatters to the floor. Ethan, hearing the commotion from outside, dashes in through the back, a mixture of confusion and terror plastered on his face. He spots Layla pinned by 2 intruders. Without thinking, he snatches a frying pan off the counter and charges, swinging it as hard as his small arms can manage. The pan collides with the side of one attacker's head, drawing a snarl of pain. Another intruder rips the pan from Ethan's grip, then shoves him to the ground. Brave kid, the attacker sneers, kicking him hard enough that he crumples, gasping for breath. Layla screams, "Leave him alone. He's just a boy." Her voice cracks with fear and rage. One of the intruders, the tall woman, calmly pulls a knife and carves a savage symbol into the wooden wall by the door. It's the same design Malcolm glimpsed at the hardware store, now it's a calling card left in his own home. They haul Layla out toward the SUV. She struggles, tears streaking her face, calling Ethan's name. He tries to drag himself after them, but pain stabs his side with every breath. His vision blurs. The SUV roars away in a cloud of dust, Layla's terrified eyes disappearing behind tinted windows. In the aftermath, the house is a wreck, door hanging off its hinges, the living room overturned, Ethan curled up on the floor, tears mixing with dust. He musters the strength to crawl toward his phone, which is half buried under an overturned chair. But before he can reach it, the rumble of an engine outside catches his attention. Hope flares, maybe Grandpa's back. Malcolm pulls up the driveway, noticing immediately that something's off. His hand tightens on the steering wheel at the sight of the broken door. He barely waits for the truck to stop before leaping out, rifle in hand. He calls for Ethan, stepping over splintered wood. The living room is trashed. And there, behind an upturned table, lies Ethan. The boy's face is pale, etched with shock and pain. Malcolm rushes to his grandson. "Ethan," he shouts, dropping to one knee. He finds bruises forming on the boy's arms and ribs. "My God, what happened?" He checks for broken bones, suppressing the surge of rage that threatens to overcome him. They took Layla," Ethan croaks, voice cracking. "I tried to stop them, Grandpa. I tried." Malcolm wraps Ethan in a hug, fury radiating from every muscle. "It's not your fault," Malcolm whispers. though bitterness and guilt twist inside him. He helps Ethan to his feet, scanning the carved cartel symbol on the wall. His expression hardens. This is a declaration of war. After checking Ethan's injuries and ensuring he's well enough to move, Malcolm ushers him into the truck and drives into the small town once more. His mind whirls. The local law is notoriously overwhelmed or corrupt. But there's one man, Cole Abrams, an ex-sheriff who turned in his badge when the system refused to fight corruption. If anyone can offer help or at least a lead, it's him. They pull up to a rundown cabin on the outskirts of Burton's Bluff. The place is barely more than a shack. Chickens cluck around the yard. A wiry figure steps onto the porch, hat in hand, revealing a gaunt face lined by years of stress. When he sees Malcolm, Cole's weary expression flickers with surprise. "Malcolm Ross," he says, leaning on a wooden post. "Been a while. Didn't think I'd see you darkening my doorstep again." Malcolm, cradling Ethan close, doesn't bother with small talk. "Cole, I need your help. My granddaughter's been taken. The same cartel punks I ran into at the hardware store. They attacked my ranch." Cole listens quietly. The boy's bruised face speaks volumes. Finally, Cole says, "You're messing with Miguel Suarez's crew. They're not random thugs. They're part of a bigger network. Word is they have deep pockets, and half the local authority is in their pocket." Malcolm's voice is hoarse but cold. "I don't care who they pay off. They took Layla. Where would they hide her?" Cole sucks in a breath, gazing at Ethan. "Kid, maybe wait in the truck, yeah?" Ethan glances uncertainly at Malcolm, who nods. Once the boy is out of earshot, Cole continues, "Suarez runs his people like a machine. They've got safe houses all over the county and beyond. You try to face them alone, they'll grind you down." A flicker of old defiance stirs in Malcolm's eyes. They don't know who they're dealing with. "I'll tear this county apart if I have to." Cole studies him for a long moment, remembering the soldier he once knew. Then he releases a resigned sigh. "I won't stop you, but I can't openly help either. Too many eyes. Too many ways to get folks killed. I do know someone who might have intel on their stash houses, a contact named Elena Diaz, whose brother was murdered by Suarez's crew. She's been gathering scraps of information, looking to bring them down. But she's in deep hiding." Malcolm nods. "Then tell me where to find her." Cole hesitates, but the desperation in Malcolm's voice is undeniable. Finally, he scribbles an address on a tattered notepad. "It's off the old highway, near the foothills. She's got reason to hate Suarez. She might talk, but she'll be wary. Tread lightly." Malcolm thanks him with a curt nod, then climbs back into the truck. Ethan looks at him expectantly. The old man squeezes the boy's shoulder. "We've got a lead. But from here on out, it's going to be dangerous. You understand?" Ethan nods, eyes clouded with fear but shining with resolve. "I'm not afraid, Grandpa. We have to save Layla." They return to the ranch just long enough for Malcolm to gather supplies from a locked basement room he hasn't opened in years. Inside are remnants of his past, carefully stored firearms, fatigues folded with meticulous care, gear that speaks of an era in his life he rarely discusses. Ethan, standing at the top of the stairs, whispers, "Grandpa, is this from the army?" Malcolm nods, strapping on a handgun. "I never thought I'd need these again. But we don't have a choice." He takes a combat knife from a sheath, pausing to remember how many times he's carried it into danger. Then he pushes the memory aside. "Ethan, you stay here. Lock the doors. If you see anyone but me, hide in the cellar. Understand?" Ethan's lower lip trembles. "But what if they come back?" Malcolm forces a confident tone. "They won't get past me. You've done enough for one day, Ethan." The boy's eyes brim with tears he fights to hold back. "Bring Layla home," he pleads. Malcolm stands, gear weighing on his shoulders like the burdens of old. "Count on it," he replies. Stepping out into the night, he glances up at the moon. The calm desert air contrasts sharply with the turmoil in his mind. Then he climbs into the truck, preparing to drive into uncharted danger. What do you think? Did Malcolm make the right call intervening at the store, even if it meant antagonizing a cartel? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to stick around to see if he can rescue Layla before time runs out. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you'll be here to witness the showdown that's brewing. Malcolm navigates an old desert backroad, headlights off to avoid drawing attention. He stops behind a tumble of rocks a mile from Elena Diaz's hideout. The terrain is rugged and silent except for the occasional howl of coyotes. He checks his rifle, slips out of the truck, and continues on foot. Elena's safe house, if that's what it can be called, sits at the bottom of a short ravine. A faint glow comes from inside. The windows are mostly boarded, and there's a rickety fence encircling a small yard. Malcolm circles around, scanning for sentries. None visible. Cole had warned him Elena is jumpy and might shoot strangers on sight. Approaching cautiously, he calls out, "Elena Diaz? I'm a friend of Cole Abrams. I need information about Suarez." There's a rustling sound, then a voice from behind a battered barrel. "Drop your gun." Malcolm freezes, lifting his hands to show he means no harm. A figure steps into the pale moonlight, a woman in her late 20s, perhaps, wearing a loose shirt and dusty jeans, dark hair pulled back. In her grip, a small revolver. Malcolm can see the fear in her eyes and the unwavering determination that keeps her from trembling. "Cole told me you might help," he says quietly. "My granddaughter's been taken by Suarez's crew." Elena's grip tightens on the revolver. She glances around anxiously. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm out of options," Malcolm answers, voice low. "And because your brother died at Suarez's hands, right? Let's call it a mutual interest in stopping him." For a tense moment, Elena studies his weathered face. At last, she lowers the gun and gestures for him to step into the dimly lit interior of her shack. It's cramped, musty, dominated by a scarred wooden table cluttered with notes, newspaper clippings, and a laptop that looks at least a decade old. She motions for him to sit. Wariness resonates in every breath she takes. Suarez's people, they're planning to expand. Drugs, extortion, trafficking. Your granddaughter might be a bargaining chip or a hostage they'll force into labor. Hard to say. Malcolm's jaw sets, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "I won't let that happen." Elena nods, flipping through a pile of scribbled addresses, half-coded references, and photos. "Cole said you were in the army. Special ops?" Malcolm doesn't confirm or deny, just says, "I've seen enough conflict to handle myself." She slides a folder across the table, eyes dark. "I've collected scraps of intel. Where Suarez's men hold prisoners, how they move contraband. They have multiple hideouts, but 2 are rumored to host high-value captives. One's a half-collapsed warehouse in Lakewood. Another's a run-down motel near the border." Malcolm glances over the notes, heart pounding. Every second that ticks by, Layla remains in the hands of merciless criminals. Which is more likely? Elena's mouth sets in a grim line. The warehouse is heavily guarded. Locals whisper about screams at night. The motel is rumored to be a short-term stash site. If they're planning to keep your granddaughter for any length of time, my guess is the warehouse. He rifles through photos of a nondescript building, chain-link fences, armed men scrawled with possible shift changes. It's daunting but not insurmountable. "You have a reason to want them gone," Malcolm says quietly. Elena's gaze flickers to a framed photo by the cluttered table. 2 smiling siblings, younger and carefree, stand next to a dusty pickup. "They took my brother in broad daylight. He refused to pay protection money for our orchard. A week later, they found him in a ditch." Her knuckles whiten against the edge of the table. "I've been gathering evidence ever since, hoping to deliver a death blow to Suarez's operation." Malcolm stands, ignoring the twinge of pain in his knee. "I'm going after him, after them. This warehouse, any clue on the layout?" She digs further into her disorganized trove of papers, pulling out a hand-drawn map with notes on vantage points, possible entrances. It's more thorough than Malcolm dared hope for. "You won't get in alone," Elena warns. They're well-armed, and Suarez's top enforcer, a man called Breathless, is rumored to be stationed there. A flicker of old soldier's pride sparks in Malcolm's eyes. "I've fought bigger armies." He slides the map into his pack. "Thank you. You've done more than I expected." Before he can leave, Elena stops him. "Wait." She slips him a burner phone. If you find her, or if you need backup, call me. I can help coordinate an escape route, or maybe cause a distraction. I'm not letting Suarez claim another life. Malcolm takes the phone, gratitude mixing with the urgency he feels. Thank you, he says simply. Stepping outside, he sees the night has deepened, the moon high. Stay safe, Elena calls after him. He nods, mind racing. Next stop, Lakewood, 100 miles away, each mile a step closer to a confrontation that might define the rest of his life. Hours later, far from the battered shack, Layla huddles in a cramped, windowless room. Her wrists ache from tight bindings. Her head throbs where one of the kidnappers struck her. There's a rank smell of unwashed bodies and mold. She tries to calm her breath, replaying every lesson Malcolm ever taught about survival, things she used to roll her eyes at. Now she clings to them. She can hear distant voices through the walls, though the words are muffled. She suspects there are other captives too. That knowledge churns her stomach. She knows her grandfather. He won't stop until he finds her. She only hopes he doesn't get himself killed. An imposing figure steps into the dim light of her prison, backlit by the flickering hallway lamp. It's the tall woman who led the intrusion, the one with that cruel symbol etched on her skin. A sneer twists her lips. Your grandpa? He's no hero, she remarks, stepping closer. This is Suarez's territory. He'll bleed if he tries anything. Layla's voice shakes, but she musters a glare. You don't know him. He'll come for me. The woman smirks, leaning in so close Layla can smell stale cigarette smoke on her breath. That's exactly what we want, she says softly. Because that's how we'll crush him. Layla's heart thunders, fear threatening to swallow her whole. Still, she lifts her chin and says nothing more. If they want to break her spirit, they'll have to try a lot harder. Meanwhile, Malcolm drives through the desert night, the headlights of his old truck cutting a lonely path across unpaved roads. He pulls off near a creek bed a few miles from Lakewood, kills the engine, and tries to snatch a few hours of rest in the driver's seat. But sleep won't come easily. Each time he closes his eyes, he sees Ethan's tears, hears Layla screaming. The guilt gnaws at him. Maybe if he hadn't intervened at the hardware store, they wouldn't have come for his family. Maybe if he'd taught Layla more self-defense. But regrets won't save her. Action will. When the first hint of dawn colors the sky, Malcolm restarts the truck, coffee thermos in hand, and heads for the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Lakewood. According to Elena's map, the building sits near a set of old train tracks. Overgrown weeds and decaying vehicles litter the property. Malcolm parks in a copse of trees a quarter-mile away, grabbing his rifle and a small duffel of supplies. He moves quietly, scanning the terrain. In the gray light of early morning, he can just make out silhouettes patrolling the warehouse's perimeter. 3 guards, maybe 4, all armed. Chain-link fence stands between him and them. He sets up a vantage behind a rusted delivery van, raising binoculars to assess the structure. It's as Elena described, multiple entrances, some sealed with metal bars, others watched by roving guards. He glances at his watch, thinking about shift changes. Cartel operations often keep guards rotating at unpredictable intervals, but everyone has to slip eventually. He creeps closer. At one point, the butt of his rifle clinks against a scrap of debris. One guard swivels, peering into the gloom. Malcolm holds his breath, rifle leveled. The guard hesitates, then continues. Malcolm exhales. One near miss is enough. He climbs a short stack of crates to see over a portion of the fence. Spotting a gap near the southeast corner, he resolves to plant a small charge there. The element of surprise is his best asset. He unzips the duffel, pulling out a pair of homemade explosives. Nothing fancy, just enough to breach the fence and cause confusion. Placing them quietly at the base of the fence, he arms the charges. The slow beep-beep reminds him of an old-time heartbeat monitor. Next, he retreats behind the rusted van, steadying his breathing, counting down the seconds. Then the dull whump of the explosion shatters the morning calm. Smoke and dust billow across the yard. The guards snap into action, shouting in Spanish, rifles raised. Malcolm uses the confusion. He darts through the ragged hole in the fence, dropping one guard with a clean shot to the chest. Another tries to return fire, but Malcolm rolls behind a stack of tires, quickly popping out to land a bullet in the man's shoulder. The guard collapses, screaming. Already, footsteps pound from inside the warehouse. Malcolm sprints along the building's exterior, looking for an entry point. Gunfire cracks around him, bullets ricocheting off concrete. He ducks, hugging the wall. Another guard attempts to flank him, but Malcolm is faster. He fires twice, and the guard crashes onto a patch of weeds. The old soldier's heart drums a furious rhythm. He's not sure how many enemies remain, but he guesses it's more than he can handle for long. Inside the warehouse, the swirling smoke sets the perfect stage for chaos. Malcolm leaps through a shattered window. He finds himself in a wide corridor lined with metal shelving. The odor of sweat, motor oil, and rotting garbage assaults him. Shouts echo, but the smoke obscures everything. He inches forward, rifle at the ready. A burst of automatic fire from a side room forces him to drop behind a cart stacked with crates. Splinters fly as bullets chew into wood. Grunting, Malcolm blindly hurls a flashbang around the corner. There's a sharp pop and a burst of light. Through the disorientation, he hears curses and coughs. He advances, finishing two armed men in quick succession, the muzzle of his rifle flashing in the gloom. The corridor reeks of gunpowder now. Swiftly, he checks each door along the hallway for signs of captives. The first opens into a storage room filled with boxes of contraband. He can see baggies of white powder, wads of cash. No Layla. The second door is locked. He braces his shoulder against it, slamming it once, twice, until the flimsy latch breaks. Inside, he finds several cowering individuals who stare at him in terror. Some appear battered, eyes hollow. They might be traffic victims or other hostages. Malcolm's stomach churns. Anyone see a teenage girl with brown hair? He asks, breath ragged. They shake their heads, but one woman points to a makeshift office at the far end of the warehouse. They take new arrivals there, she whispers. Malcolm nods, urging them to stay put for now. He can't escort them out until he's sure the path is clear. But at least they're free from their immediate captors. The fact that Layla isn't among them amps his urgency. He continues through the winding corridors. Another guard appears from a side passage, letting off a volley of shots. One bullet grazes Malcolm's arm, a fiery slice of pain. He grits his teeth and returns fire, sending the guard reeling. At last, he spots a short flight of stairs leading to an office with grimy windows. That must be the place. He steals himself, checking the last flashbang at his belt. The old soldier in him knows time is short, reinforcements might already be en route. He lobs the flashbang into the office through a shattered pane, then charges up the steps. The flash stuns whoever is inside. Malcolm kicks open the door. In a swirl of smoke and confusion, he sees cots along one wall, a desk stacked with ledgers, and two armed men staggering from the flash. One recovers quickly, nearly knocking Malcolm off his feet with a wild swing of a rifle butt. Malcolm's vision swims, but he rallies, driving his elbow into the attacker's throat. The man collapses, choking. The second one tries to bring his gun around. Malcolm grapples with him, both struggling for control. The weapon discharges, the bullet smashing a flickering overhead light. Malcolm twists, slams the guard's wrist on the edge of the desk, forcing him to drop the gun. A final punch to the jaw leaves the man unconscious. Catching his breath, Malcolm scans the office. No sign of Layla. Anger surges, mixing with dread. He notices a rough map pinned to a corkboard with lines connecting different buildings. Could be the cartel's network. More importantly, a photo clipped there, grainy but unmistakably Layla. A scribbled note in Spanish suggests they'd already moved her. Hands shaking, Malcolm rips the photo off the board. She's wearing the same outfit from the day she was taken, face bruised, eyes distant. He curses under his breath, wishing he'd gotten here sooner. He rifles through the ledgers on the desk, scanning for a clue. Nothing definitive. Then he finds a scrap of paper. Cargo transfer, Route 15, midnight. Could this be a scheduled movement of hostages? He hears the scuff of a boot behind him. Spinning, rifle raised, he finds a man he doesn't recognize leaning in the doorway, hands slightly raised. The man is older, battered, perhaps a prisoner forced to labor here. "You want the girl, right?" he says in thickly accented English. "They took her to another place. A small compound near the border." "She's important?" Malcolm narrows his gaze. "Where?" The man rattles off directions in halting detail. Something about an abandoned orchard, high fences, well-armed guards. "They said the boss wanted her as leverage. That your confrontation in town brought attention they don't like." The mention of the boss lights a furnace in Malcolm's gut. Suarez, presumably, or a top lieutenant. Without a second thought, he snatches the address. "You're sure she's there?" "As sure as I can be," the man replies. "You can check the ledger. They keep track of who goes where." Malcolm flings the ledger open again, scanning pages of coded references. He sees a note referencing a young female asset transferred to a secondary facility. Could match the man's claim. He tears out the page. Time to go. Sirens wail in the distance, likely local law enforcement, or maybe cartel reinforcements. They might even be in each other's pockets. He glances at the cowering man who gave him the intel. "Get out of here. Free whoever you can." The man nods, slipping away. Malcolm slips back down the corridor. Smoke from the earlier firefight lingers, swirling in the light from flickering bulbs. He sees the door leading outside, hears shouting and vehicles revving. With a grin set to his jaw, he checks his ammo. 2 more bullets in the rifle's mag. A pistol in his belt with a single spare clip. It'll have to do. He stumbles out into the yard, blinking in the harsh sunlight. A black SUV tears around the corner of the building, tires kicking up gravel. The driver leans out the window, spraying bullets. Malcolm dives behind a forklift. Sparks fly as rounds ricochet off metal. He fires back, shattering the windshield. The SUV swerves, smashing into a stack of crates. The engine sputters. No time to confirm the driver's fate. Malcolm flees, weaving between broken machinery and piles of rusted scrap. The perimeter fence is in chaos. Smoke from the earlier explosion still lingers, and a few battered guards lie groaning. With measured steps, he avoids them, slipping out the same breach he created. His old truck is parked a distance away, engine still cool. He climbs in, tossing the rifle onto the passenger seat, breathing hard. Blood trickles from the gash on his arm. He rips a strip from his shirt to stanch it. Every heartbeat is a painful drum. He's not as young as he once was. But Layla's out there, scared and alone, and the knowledge pulses in his veins like raw adrenaline. He guns the engine and peels away, leaving behind the bullet-riddled warehouse. Law enforcement sirens grow closer, but he's not stopping to chat. If half of them are on the cartel's payroll, they'll do more harm than good. He's got the address, a lead. He'll rest only when Layla is safe. Miles away, Suarez's phone vibrates. He picks up, hearing breathless subordinates describe the firefight at the warehouse, how the old man's tore through their defenses, freed some captives, and discovered Layla's location. Suarez's lips curl in a sneer. "So he's persistent," he says in a low, menacing tone. "Good. Let him come. I'll bury him and his granddaughter together." Back at the ranch, Ethan anxiously awaits word. He tries to pass the time by tidying the wrecked living room or feeding the few ranch animals they own, but his mind strays to thoughts of Layla. He sits on the porch swing, dog at his feet, staring at the horizon. He imagines Malcolm blazing a trail through the desert, determined to keep his promises. The boy's fists clench as he murmurs, "Hurry, Grandpa." Meanwhile, Malcolm drives with single-minded focus, forging onward to this so-called orchard near the border. He's exhausted, pain flaring in every old injury and new wound, but he welcomes the discomfort. It keeps him sharp. He's survived enough firefights and dodged enough bullets to know that each confrontation might be his last. This time, the stakes are personal. He can almost hear Layla's voice, telling him how silly all his precautions used to seem. Now she must understand, in the worst way, why he never truly let his guard down. Malcolm drives through miles of dusty terrain, the southwestern sky unfurling in deep blues and purples as evening descends. Each mile in the truck feels heavier than the last. His wounded arm aches, sending jolts of pain whenever he jerks the steering wheel or shifts gears. Occasionally, he glances at the torn page he took from the warehouse ledger, hoping the scribbled references to a border orchard are accurate. If the man's tip is wrong, if he's following a ghost, Layla might slip even further out of reach. He remembers the terror on Ethan's face, the quiet look of desperation in Layla's eyes on the rare occasions she actually asked him for advice. Guilt churns in his gut. He tried so hard to give them a peaceful life out here on the ranch, shield them from the uglier sides of the world. Now, ugliness has invaded their sanctuary, and the cost might be more than he can bear. The truck's headlights bounce across the pitted dirt road. Once he's within a couple of miles of the orchard, he kills the lights, traveling under starlight and the faint glow of a rising moon. He needs the element of stealth. Headlights would announce him to anyone posted as a lookout. When the orchard comes into view, rows of gnarled trees surrounded by chain-link fencing and floodlights that pierce the darkness, Malcolm pulls off onto a side track. Cacti and tangled shrubs crowd around him, forming a natural hiding spot for the old pickup. He shuts off the engine. For a moment, he just sits in the hush, letting his eyes adjust. He checks his phone. No reception worth a damn out here. The only number he'd call anyway is Elena, or maybe the ranch to reassure Ethan. But stealth is paramount, and he can't risk a phone's glow or ring. Swallowing the pang of worry for Ethan, he pops the glove box and retrieves a small flashlight with red cellophane taped over the lens to dim the beam. He aims it at the orchard perimeter, scanning for movement. Sure enough, silhouettes patrol the fence line at intervals. Each silhouette carries a long gun, posture rigid. He counts at least 6 on the outside, possibly more within. He recalls Elena's intelligence, that Suarez, or his top lieutenants, might keep vital assets, like prized hostages, in a more secure area deeper in the property. There could be guard dogs, motion sensors, even tripwires. Cartels adapt quickly. And if Layla is indeed here, they'll expect Malcolm to come for her, especially after the warehouse raid. Part of him wonders if they'll try moving her again. Fear needles his thoughts. What if he's already too late? Gritting his teeth, he presses a hand to his injured arm. The makeshift bandage has bled through, but he'll have to push through the pain. He slings a smaller daypack over his shoulder, equipped with a pair of homemade flashbangs, zip ties, extra mags, and a combat knife. The rifle, still dusty from the warehouse fight, hangs from a shoulder strap. He can't carry too much. Speed and agility matter more now. He exits the truck, boots crunching softly on packed earth. As he circles wide around the orchard, the tang of citrus blossoms mixes with the dusty desert air. Ghostly trees, bare in some sections, sprawl under the harsh geometry of the floodlights, their twisted branches like skeletal arms. He finds a vantage point behind some overgrown bushes, crouching to observe. The orchard gate is well lit, a single wide entrance for trucks, with a small guard booth. He also spots a rutted dirt path that seems to loop around to a side area. The orchard fence extends far, but in the moonlight, he notices places where the fence sags or has been patched. Cartels aren't always known for pristine maintenance. He waits, eyes narrowed, mapping the pattern of the guards' patrols. They pass a certain corner every few minutes. He wonders if there's a gap in their route that would let him slip over the fence unseen. The orchard building at the property's center looks like a large storage barn or old processing plant, likely retrofitted for cartel business. Dim light spills from an open doorway. Occasionally, he glimpses silhouettes crossing inside. He steels himself, the old soldier's calm settling over him despite the tension gnawing at his chest. He times his move. The nearest guard paces away, disappearing behind a row of citrus trees. Another guard stands near a floodlight post, scanning the horizon. Malcolm creeps forward. Every step must be precise. No stepping on stray branches, no sudden noises. The chain-link fence is about 8 feet tall, topped with barbed wire in some places, but not all. He finds a spot where the wire is missing, either rusted away or never replaced. Perfect. He removes a length of cloth from his pack. With careful, silent movements, he lays it across the top of the fence to pad against the metal's rasp. Then he hoists himself up, hooking his good arm first, wincing at the pull in his injured arm as he swings his legs over. He lands on the inside, dropping to a crouch. The orchard smell is stronger here, a blend of earth, citrus, and stale water from an old irrigation canal. The hum of a generator somewhere sets a bass drone. Malcolm remains still, letting his eyes and ears adjust. In the distance, a guard calls out in Spanish to someone. Another replies. The orchard is alive with uneasy vigilance, like an anthill after being kicked. This is no time for half measures. He must be swift, or risk being overrun. He weaves between rows of spindly citrus trees, trunk after trunk, leaves brushing his sleeves. Occasionally, a fallen orange squishes underfoot, making him cringe at the noise, but no one seems to hear. He checks the pattern of floodlights. They leave pockets of shadow he can exploit, just enough for an experienced infiltrator to move invisibly. At last, he nears the main building. A heavy sliding door stands open, revealing a wide interior space that might once have processed fruit. Now, it's likely a makeshift holding facility, a stash point for contraband or kidnapped victims. A pungent smell of chemicals drifts out. He hears muffled voices, too distant to make out words. If Layla's inside, that's where she'll be. He skirts the perimeter, spotting a rusted loading dock where old pallets and crates lie discarded. One forklift sits abandoned, paint peeling. Malcolm crouches behind it, scanning for watchers. Two armed men stand near the open door, chatting in low voices. He weighs his odds. If he tries to slip past them, they'll spot him. If he engages openly, the entire orchard might descend on him. He needs a distraction. From his pack, he withdraws one of the homemade flashbangs. Not ideal to use it so early, but better than a direct firefight. Carefully, he pulls the pin and tosses it toward a cluster of old barrels 20 yards away. The device clatters, and a second later, it emits a searing flash of light followed by a thundering bang that echoes among the trees. The two guards at the door reflexively turn toward the noise, guns raised. Malcolm seizes the moment, sprinting across the open stretch. Their attention is on the barrels. They don't notice the lean figure slipping inside behind them. Inside, the air is thick and humid. Flickering fluorescent bulbs illuminate a labyrinth of old conveyor belts and catwalks overhead. At first glance, Malcolm sees no immediate sign of captives. But a door on the far side stands partially open, emitting a bluish glow. Low voices murmur from within. He edges around the defunct machinery, passing a few crates stamped with foreign labels. Could be drugs or weapons. The voices grow clearer, a man barking orders in Spanish, another replying, followed by a short, feminine laugh that prickles the hair on Malcolm's neck. He presses against the wall near the half-open door, heart pounding. He peeks around the edge. The room beyond looks like a gutted office with patched walls, a grimy linoleum floor. Harsh overhead lighting buzzes. He sees a tall, gaunt man with a shaved head. He must be Breathless, the rumored enforcer. Beside him stands the woman with the jagged symbol, the one who carved a warning into Malcolm's wall. She's leaning against a table, smirking at someone huddled on the floor. Malcolm's chest tightens when he recognizes Layla, wrists bound, trembling but alive. She has fresh bruises, her hair in disarray. Breathless paces near her, gesturing with a pistol. "You want to go home?" the woman mocks, tapping her foot. "We'll see if your grandpa can survive long enough to bargain." Layla says nothing, fear and anger warring on her bruised face. The scene ignites a fury in Malcolm so intense he almost charges in, guns blazing. But he restrains himself. One bullet from Breathless's pistol could end Layla in an instant. He needs precision. He glances around, searching for any advantage. A single overhead lamp sways, the wiring exposed. The table has multiple handguns scattered on its surface. The woman holds a rifle casually. Breathless keeps his pistol in hand. Another guard stands in the corner, face partially hidden by shadows. 3 enemies. Malcolm's bullets won't fail him, but the risk to Layla is enormous if they realize he's attacking. He remembers the second flashbang in his pack. If he can position it properly, the blinding shock might give him a narrow window to take out all 3 before they harm Layla. But he has to ensure she isn't caught in the radius. Flashbangs can disorient her too, making her vulnerable. He sucks in a breath, mind racing. He spots a short corridor leading to the left, possibly behind the wall of the room. Maybe he can find a better angle. Backing away from the doorway, he creeps down the corridor. It leads to a storage nook stacked with battered file cabinets. Thin walls separate it from the main office. There's a cracked panel that might let him see inside. He edges closer, peering through a gap. From this side, he has a diagonal view of Breathless and the woman. Layla is to their right, near the center of the room. It's not perfect, but it might work. He braces himself. He gently sets his rifle on a file cabinet, opting for the pistol to reduce the risk of wide spray. Then, carefully, he wedges the flashbang in an opening in the panel, aiming it so it will bounce near the criminals. If the device lands too close to Layla, she'll be disoriented. He can't allow that. A few inches off could be catastrophic. He breathes slowly, counting in his head. This must be done quickly. He flicks the pin free, prays his aim is true, and pushes the device through the gap. It lands on the floor with a metallic tap. Immediately, Malcolm spins around the corner, raising the pistol toward the inside of the room. The flashbang erupts. A blinding pulse of light and an ear-splitting boom reverberate. He sees the silhouettes of Breathless and the others lurch, arms flailing to shield their eyes. Layla curls in on herself, gasping. Malcolm fires in rapid succession. First shot tears through the guard in the corner, dropping him instantly. Second shot slams into the woman's chest before she can raise her rifle. She staggers backward, hitting the wall. Breathless, stunned but with practiced reflex, squeezes the trigger of his pistol blindly. Bullets rip across the room, and Malcolm ducks, a bullet grazing the doorframe near his shoulder. Malcolm fires twice more. One bullet cracks the overhead lamp, sending sparks showering. The second strikes Breathless in the leg. The man howls, collapsing onto one knee. With adrenaline surging, Malcolm dashes into the room, hooking Layla's arm to pull her away from the line of fire. Breathless tries to steady his pistol, eyes streaming from the flashbang. Malcolm doesn't hesitate. He fires once more, a shot that sends Breathless crashing face-first onto the scuffed linoleum. Smoke curls from the muzzle of Malcolm's pistol. The overhead lamp flickers, then dies, plunging the room into half-darkness. Layla gasps, trembling under Malcolm's grip. He quickly checks her over. She's bruised, dehydrated, terrified, but alive. "Grandpa," she croaks, voice cracking with relief. "Oh God, you came?" He kneels, ignoring the throbbing in his own arm. "I've got you," he says, barely above a whisper. He pulls out a small knife to slice through the zip ties on her wrists. Her arms fall free, and she collapses into his chest, sobbing with shock and relief. Gunfire erupts somewhere else in the building, evidently more guards alerted by the commotion. Malcolm helps Layla to her feet. She clings to him, struggling to catch her breath. Her voice shakes. "We have to get out. There's more of them. They said you die trying to save me." He holds her shoulders, forcing eye contact. "Listen to me, we're escaping. Stay close. I'll keep you safe." She nods, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. He notices an angry welt on her temple, bruised lines on her arms. Fury flares, but he pushes it down, focusing on survival. They hurry into the corridor. The flickering lights reveal drifting smoke from the flashbang. A pair of guards rushes around the corner, guns raised. Malcolm shoves Layla down, pressing her against a corner, and fires over her shoulder. One guard spins from a bullet to the chest, the other throws himself to the ground, returning wild shots. Malcolm shifts sideways, wincing as a bullet grazes his thigh. He fires back with unwavering composure, hitting the second guard in the torso. The man spasms and lies still. Layla stares, wide-eyed, at the chaos. She has never seen her grandfather in full combat mode, and it unnerves her almost as much as the kidnappers. "Come on," Malcolm urges, tugging her up. They dash through the labyrinth of old equipment, heading for the large open area they passed. Shouting and gunfire echo from outside as well, maybe the orchard guards scrambling to respond. Each step is agony for Malcolm's battered body, but he keeps going. They reach the main chamber, rickety conveyor belts, overhead catwalks. A half-dozen crates stacked near the center. The wide sliding door stands about 50 feet away, half lowered. Through the gap, Malcolm glimpses a partial view of the orchard yard. Shadows flit past the threshold, armed figures. If they rush out blindly, they'll be gunned down. Layla's breath rattles, and she clings to Malcolm's jacket. "We'll never get past all of them," she whispers, panic edging her tone. He scans the catwalks overhead. Maybe there's a loft or a side window. Then he spots a narrow corridor that branches off behind the conveyor belts, possibly leading to a back exit or a loading dock that's not well guarded. Time is critical, so he acts on instinct, guiding Layla that way. "Stay low," he whispers. She nods, eyes flicking to the bodies of the men he's taken down. They weave around the conveyor belts. A bullet smacks into a belt, sending chunks of old rubber flying. Malcolm spins to see a guard perched on a raised platform. The guard fires again, forcing them behind a column of stacked crates. Malcolm slides his last clip into the pistol. "Layla, keep down," he breathes. He peeks out, returning fire. The distance is awkward for the pistol, but he manages to land a shot that grazes the guard's arm. The man staggers, losing aim. Malcolm uses the chance to rush forward, duck behind another machine. Layla follows close, adrenaline overriding her exhaustion. The guard recovers and fires, bullets shrieking across the metal scaffolding. One tears through Layla's sleeve, barely missing her. She emits a strangled cry, falling to one knee. Malcolm whirls, aiming carefully. The guard flinches as Malcolm squeezes the trigger. The shot strikes home, and the guard tumbles off the platform with a pained yell. Silence, apart from the clatter of his rifle hitting the floor. Malcolm rushes back to Layla. "You hit," he demands, scanning her face. She's trembling, tears threatening to spill, but she shakes her head. Just scared." "Me too," he confesses softly, helping her up again. "Let's keep moving." Finally, they find the corridor. It's narrower and darker than the main routes, lined with dust-caked windows set high in the walls. They follow it past more storage nooks until they reach a latch door. Malcolm tries the handle, but he grits his teeth. Another locked door stands in their way. Bullets could break the lock, but that would draw attention. He checks the pockets of the guard he just shot. No key. Another wave of gunfire echoes from the main area, voices shouting, "Check the back halls." They must be heading there. Layla's eyes dart around desperately. "We're trapped." "Not yet," Malcolm mutters. He eyes the dusty windows above. They're small, but perhaps wide enough for Layla to squeeze through. He motions to a nearby metal shelf. "We can climb that shelf to get up there." Layla hesitates, scanning the window's cracked glass. Better than being cornered by the cartel. She nods. Malcolm stoops, letting Layla step onto his thigh, boosting her up. She grips the top of the shelf, legs scrambling, eventually hauling herself onto it. She gasps in pain from bruised muscles, but determination blazes in her eyes. "Okay," she hisses, hooking her fingers under the window's edge. The glass is filthy, spiderwebbed with cracks. She pulls with all her might, but it won't budge. "It's stuck." "Move aside," Malcolm says. He climbs the shelf behind her, ignoring the stabbing agony in his thigh and arm. Once perched next to her, he wedges his knife into the frame, prying. The old wood creaks. Finally, with a jolt, the window groans open an inch. Dust sifts down. "Keep going," he urges, applying more leverage. Another inch. He sets the knife aside. "See if you can slip out." Layla manages to wedge her upper body through the gap. The metal tears at her shirt. Then her legs follow, and with a soft grunt, she's out, perched on a ledge outside. Malcolm exhales relief. Another volley of gunfire rattles from the corridor entrance. "We have to hurry," she whispers through the window. Malcolm braces his good foot on a shelf bracket, pulling himself up. The shelf wobbles dangerously under his weight. With a grimace, he squeezes through the window. Shards of glass gouge his jacket. He sucks in his stomach, forcing his shoulders through the tight opening. Pain screams in every wound, but he grits his teeth until he's outside, blinking in the moonlight. They're about 15 feet off the ground, standing on a narrow ledge that runs along the building's exterior. Layla clutches the brick wall, panting. Malcolm peers down. The ground is scattered with broken pallets and rusted machinery parts. On the far side, the orchard's barbed fence looms. They can't climb down quietly without risking broken ankles. He scans for an alternative. Below and to the right, an old gutter pipe extends from the roof to near the ground. It's attached to the wall by metal brackets, rusted, likely unreliable. But it may be their only quick way down. Layla notices it too. She swallows hard. That thing's barely hanging on. Malcolm checks the corridor window they just exited. Any moment now, the guards might barge in, see the open window and open fire. No choice, he mutters. He slides carefully along the ledge, testing the pipe's stability with one hand. It rattles ominously. He yanks on it. One bracket snaps loose, but the others hold. We'll go one at a time. Slow. Layla nods, teeth chattering with fear. She slides her leg over the ledge, grips the pipe with both hands. It sways under her weight, squealing in protest. Easy, Malcolm says, voice hushed. She descends carefully, inch by inch. About halfway down, a bracket near the top rips from the wall with a sickening crunch. The pipe tilts away, sending dust and chunks of mortar flying. Layla shrieks, clinging desperately. Malcolm lunges to grab the top of the pipe before it fully detaches. Pain rips through his wounded arm. He nearly blacks out but forces himself to hold on. Keep going, Layla. He grinds out, arm muscles quivering. She scrambles down the tilting pipe, feet scraping the wall, until she drops the last few feet to the ground. A sharp cry escapes her as she lands awkwardly. She collapses to her knees, but she's safe on solid ground. Malcolm tries to ease his grip, but the pipe tears free with a final screech. He releases it, letting it clatter to the ground in a cloud of rust. Now he's perched on the ledge alone, about 15 feet up, no safe hold left. Gritting his teeth, he braces his back against the wall and slides his body off the edge, trying to hang from the ledge with his good arm. The moment his boots dangle, he drops. The impact jolts his legs, pain spiking up his injured thigh. He staggers, nearly toppling, but Layla helps prop him up. Above them, a guard leans out the broken window, cursing in Spanish. Gunfire spits from the opening. Bullets ricochet off the rubble. Malcolm hisses, dragging Layla behind a rusted piece of machinery. If they linger, more guards will rush outside. The orchard fence is about 30 yards away, dimly lit by a single floodlight. Beyond the fence, the open desert leads to a road, and eventually, Malcolm's hidden truck. We run, he whispers, ignoring the swirling dizziness of pain and blood loss. Layla's eyes dart to the fence line. She nods shakily. They break cover, sprinting across the uneven ground. Shouts from above follow them, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. Malcolm presses a hand to his side, where a fresh tear in his jacket signals another graze or worse. He spares no glance, just focuses on each bounding step. Adrenaline and paternal resolve propel him despite the searing agony. Layla keeps pace, spurred by a terror of falling back into captivity. A guard emerges from behind a stack of crates near the fence, rifle leveling. Malcolm fires first, 3 shots from the pistol. One hits the guard's shoulder, enough to spin him to the dirt. Another guard roars in anger, popping out from behind a tractor. Layla ducks behind Malcolm, heart pounding in her throat. Malcolm's pistol clicks empty. No ammo left. The guard sneers, stepping closer. Drop it, he barks in Spanish, aiming at them. Malcolm steadies his breath, one hand lifting to show compliance. With his other, he discreetly reaches for the combat knife strapped to his belt. The guard's eyes are locked on Malcolm's pistol, not noticing the blade. Malcolm flicks his wrist in a swift motion, sending the knife spinning across the short distance. It buries itself in the guard's upper chest. The man gasps, finger tightening on the trigger, but the shot goes wide, whizzing overhead. He collapses, letting out a strangled moan. Malcolm grabs Layla's hand. They reach the fence. This stretch is topped with ragged barbed wire. Beyond it, a coyote howls as if mocking them. She stares up at the menacing wire. We'll tear ourselves apart climbing that. Bullets rattle into a crate behind them, splintering wood. Malcolm spots an old metal barrel a few feet away, half filled with dirt. "Help me tip that over," he grunts. They push with combined strength, ignoring gunfire snapping around them. The barrel crashes against the fence, bowing the links outward. The top sags somewhat, barbed wire drooping. "Go!" Malcolm shouts, giving Layla a boost. She scrambles up the tilted barrel, hooking her arms over the sagging fence. It still snags her, ripping a bit of cloth, but she manages to swing one leg over. The wire snags at her pants, drawing a thin line of blood on her calf, and she yelps. Summoning a burst of adrenaline, she flings herself over, landing heavily in the dust on the other side. Malcolm clambers after her. His thigh screams in protest, but he forces the muscles to work. He nearly slips, grabbing the wire for balance. Barbs shred his palm. The pain is staggering, but he hauls himself over the fence and collapses on the ground, panting. Bullets clang against the fence behind him. He can't pause. Guards will come around the perimeter in seconds. He staggers upright, pulling Layla along. They limp into the darkness of the open desert, weaving around brush and cacti. The orchard lights recede behind them. Malcolm aims for where he left the truck, praying no curious patrol discovered it. Miraculously, they reach the battered pickup behind the rocky outcropping. The truck is untouched. Malcolm practically tumbles into the driver's seat. Layla slides in next to him, breath ragged, tears carving fresh tracks through the grime on her face. He jabs the key in the ignition. The engine sputters, then roars to life. Without headlights, he peels away, dust swirling in their wake. Only once they've put some distance between themselves and the orchard does Malcolm dare to switch on the dim beams. His entire body feels as if it's on fire. Layla's voice wobbles. I thought I'd never see you again." She grips the dash, knuckles white. "I was so scared, Grandpa." He can barely swallow past the lump in his throat. "I'd never stop looking," he replies, voice thick. "Never. Not until I brought you home." She sniffles, tears of both relief and trauma shaking her. They drive on, eventually hitting a forlorn stretch of highway that leads back toward the ranch. Dawn is still hours away, the sky in endless, star-flecked black. Malcolm's vision blurs from blood loss, but he fights to keep focus. "I have to stop soon," he croaks. "Need to patch us up?" Layla glances at his injuries with alarm. "You're bleeding a lot, Grandpa. Please, pull over." He knows she's right. Pressing too far could cause him to black out behind the wheel. With a shaky nod, he spots a small gravel road leading away from the main route. He eases the truck onto it, finally coming to a stop under a lone cottonwood tree. The desert hush envelopes them. The engine ticks, heat dissipating. Layla helps him move into the back seat, rummaging through the gear for the first aid supplies. She stares at the bullet graze on his thigh, the torn palm from the barbed wire, the older wound on his arm, half infected. He's a mess. With trembling hands, she applies antiseptic, tears bandages from a roll. He groans, biting down on a rag to keep from crying out. "You're good at this," he manages between gritted teeth. She forces a wry half-smile. "I watched some of those first aid videos you kept sending me." That earns a faint chuckle from him. It hurts her to see her grandfather, once the unshakable rock of her life, groaning in pain. But behind his agony, there's a warmth in his eyes. They both know they're alive, together, and that's what matters. When his bleeding is somewhat controlled, she slumps into the passenger seat, exhaustion claiming her. Malcolm slides back to the driver's seat, though every movement feels like it could be his last. She begs him to rest, but he's determined to get home. "Ethan's waiting," he whispers. Layla's face tightens at the mention of her little brother, guilt surfacing for leaving him unprotected. "Right? Let's go see him." In the dim hush before dawn, the truck rattles its way up the final stretch of dirt road to the Ross Ranch. The silhouette of the ranch house emerges from the gloom, battered but standing. Lights glow through the windows. Probably Ethan staying awake, anxious for news. As soon as Malcolm parks, Layla yanks the door open, stumbling out. She yells, "Ethan," in a tearful voice. The boy bursts through the battered front door, hair tousled, eyes wide. He sprints across the yard, colliding with Layla so hard they nearly topple. She hugs him fiercely, sobbing, "It's okay. I'm here, I'm back." Ethan can barely speak, tears clogging his throat. Radar, the old ranch dog, runs circles around them, barking excitedly. Malcolm, on shaky legs, manages to exit the truck, leaning heavily on the door. Ethan notices him and breaks from Layla's embrace, rushing over. "Grandpa!" The boy's face flits from joy to alarm when he sees the bandages, the blood-stained clothes. Malcolm sets a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm all right," he murmurs, though that's debatable. "We got her back." Ethan looks at Layla, taking in her bruises and the haunted look in her eyes. She tries to give him a reassuring smile but ends up choking on tears. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she says brokenly. "I'm sorry they hurt you. I'm sorry you had to see all this." He shakes his head, tears shining. "You're home now. That's all that matters." They half carry Malcolm inside. The living room is still in disarray from the earlier invasion, but Ethan has done what he can to tidy. Radar follows, whining softly. Malcolm sinks onto the couch, adrenaline crashing, leaving him pale and shaking. Layla kneels next to him, pressing a fresh cloth to a bleeding tear in his side. Ethan hovers, not sure how to help. Through ragged breaths, Malcolm tries to reassure them. "I just need rest. And maybe a doctor, if we can trust one." Layla's eyes flick anxiously to the battered phone on the table. "I'll try calling for an ambulance or something," she says, though both of them recall how the cartel might have local law enforcement on their payroll. Ethan takes the phone, hands trembling. "I can call Cole Abrams. He can bring help, right?" "That might be safer," Malcolm agrees, wincing. "He's not on their payroll." As Ethan dials, Layla gently takes Malcolm's hand. "You saved me," she whispers, voice thick. I didn't think you'd do all that." He musters a weary, lopsided smile. "You and Ethan are all I've got left in this world. I'd march into hell and back for you." She bows her head against his shoulder, tears falling. The fear, the captivity, the rescue, the heartbreak, she lets it all out in the safety of his arms. He lets a few tears slip too, feeling relief like he's never known. He nearly lost her. The cost was high, but she's here, warm and alive, albeit shaken to the core. Within an hour, Cole Abrams arrives in a dusty pickup, ex-sheriff star nowhere in sight, replaced by a battered cowboy hat. He steps inside, immediately taking in the scene. Malcolm half-conscious on the couch, Layla's bruised face, Ethan's anxious pacing. Cole sets down a medical bag and starts tending to Malcolm's wounds with brisk efficiency. "Damn," he mutters, disinfecting the gash in Malcolm's side. "You look like you walked through a war zone." Malcolm's laugh turns into a grimace. "Felt like it?" Cole glances at Layla. "You okay, kid?" She nods stiffly, arms crossed over her middle as if holding herself together. "They had me in some orchard near the border, threatened Grandpa's life. He saved me," she says in a near whisper. Cole's lips press thin. He tears open a bandage and secures it around Malcolm's torso, ignoring the man's groans. "Word on the street is you took out a big chunk of Suarez's operation. People are saying Montoya or some other boss might try to fill the power gap." Layla flinches at the mention of new danger. Malcolm lifts a weary gaze. "As long as this particular group is done, that's what matters. If I have to fight again, I will." Cole shakes his head, rummaging for a syringe of antibiotic. "You know, you keep mixing with cartel business, it never ends well." But he sees Malcolm's resolve in his eyes. This old soldier has reached the limits of compromise. He'll protect his family, no matter the cost. When Cole finishes patching him up, exhaustion drags Malcolm into a half-doze. Ethan and Layla wrap him in a blanket, and Cole stands watch. A hush falls over the ranch house, broken only by the soft sniffles from Layla. Eventually, Cole whispers to her that she might want to rest too, but she refuses to leave Malcolm's side. She's never clung to him like this, never realized just how much her grandfather meant until he nearly died bringing her home. Over the next few days, the ranch becomes a triage center. Cole returns daily to check on Malcolm's wounds, ensuring no infection sets in. Layla, slowly recovering from her own trauma, helps cook simple meals and change his bandages. Ethan hovers, guilt shadowing his young face for not being able to save her himself. Malcolm often ruffles the boy's hair, murmuring, "You're braver than you realize," whenever he senses Ethan's self-doubt. Layla struggles with nightmares. She wakes up gasping, the memory of captivity replaying in her mind. She tiptoes downstairs at night, sometimes finding Malcolm in his rocking chair, nursing sore ribs. He beckons her over, and they sit in the silence, a gentle desert breeze drifting through the torn screens. "I keep seeing them," she confesses one night, shaking. "I keep hearing that woman telling me you'd never make it." Malcolm squeezes her hand. "People like that prey on fear. But we overcame them." She looks at the bullet scars on his arms, the new stitches across his side, the lines of pain etched in his features. "At a cost," she murmurs, tears threatening again. He cups her cheek gently, forcing a faint, comforting smile. "I'm alive. You're alive. That's all that matters." In the aftermath, Cole discreetly informs them that Suarez's faction has collapsed, scattered by the blow Malcolm dealt at the warehouse and orchard. Some members fled south, others were picked off by local rivals. For the moment, no immediate threat looms. Still, he warns them that criminals have long memories. "You might want to keep a low profile," he advises. "They'll be hunting for who took out Velez and his crew if they come sniffing for revenge." Malcolm acknowledges the risk, but he can't uproot the family now. This ranch is their home. He quietly fortifies the perimeter again, adding more robust gates, installing better locks. Layla, to his surprise, volunteers to learn some self-defense. The experience changed her perspective. She doesn't want to feel so helpless ever again. Though the lessons are painful for both of them, physically and emotionally, she catches on quickly, her eyes burning with quiet determination. Ethan, too, insists on learning more about firearms, but Malcolm keeps him limited to basic safety lessons for now. "You're still a kid," Malcolm tells him gently, "and I want you to hold on to that as long as you can." Ethan understands but also feels the weight of everything that's happened. He idolizes his grandfather more than ever, seeing him not just as a caretaker but a warrior. As the days blend into weeks, the scars begin to heal. The ranch dust returns to its familiar routine, horses needing feed, fences needing mending, the sun scorching the earth by midday. But a deeper bond has formed among them. One night, as they gather around a modest dinner table, they share a moment of quiet appreciation. Layla meets Malcolm's gaze and mouths, "Thank you," tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. He nods, swallowing back the thickness in his throat. Ethan chatters about how he'll fortify the barn just in case, bringing a fragile smile to everyone's lips. Eventually, the time comes for Layla to decide if she still wants to leave for college. The acceptance letter pinned to her corkboard no longer seems like a golden ticket out of a dusty prison. Now she views the ranch differently, sees how ephemeral safety can be, how family is worth more than she realized. She wrestles with the choice, torn between forging her own path and staying to protect the only home she has. Malcolm, noticing her indecision, sits with her on the porch one evening, sipping water because coffee still irritates his healing body. "You should go," he says simply, gazing at the fiery sunset. "If that's what your heart's set on. Don't let fear hold you back." She studies the ridges of his scarred hands. "I don't want to abandon you." He smiles, weary but proud. "You're not abandoning me. You're living your life, with the tools you've gained here, strength, self-reliance, the knowledge that you always have a home to come back to." He brushes a wisp of her hair aside, mindful of the faint bruise near her temple. "I'll keep building fences, patching holes, and looking after Ethan. You do what you're meant to do." Tears glisten in her eyes. She leans against his shoulder. "I love you, Grandpa." "Love you more than I can say, kiddo," he whispers back. In the days that follow, a semblance of peace settles over the Ross Ranch. Malicious graffiti from the cartel is sanded off or painted over, bullet holes are repaired, broken doors replaced with stronger ones. Malcolm's limp is more pronounced now, the orchard escape having worsened an old knee injury, but he pushes on, refusing to let it define him. Ethan picks up more slack, determined to prove he can handle chores. And Layla, though still plagued by occasional nightmares, stands straighter, a quiet strength in her eyes. At last, the day arrives when she must leave for the city. Cole drives her to the bus station in Burton's Bluff, while Ethan and Malcolm stay behind to care for the animals. Before she goes, she embraces Malcolm for a long time, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you for saving me," she whispers for the 1,000th time. "I won't waste the life you fought for." He holds her tight, heart heavy but proud. "Go live," he says softly. "And remember who you are, where you came from." She steps away, boarding the bus with a final wave. As it rumbles off in a plume of diesel exhaust, Malcolm stands on the dusty curb, leaning on his cane, Ethan at his side. The boy sniffs, wiping his eyes. "She'll be back, right?" Malcolm sets a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Yeah. She'll be back." They return to the ranch. Weeks turn into months. The desert seasons cycle from scorching to stormy and back again. Time, while it can erase the scars, dulls their ache. The memory of the kidnapping and rescue lingers, but it no longer defines their days. Occasionally, news filters through Cole that smaller gangs try to stake claims in the region, but they don't bother the Ross Ranch. Maybe word got around about the old soldier who refused to be broken. At night, Malcolm sometimes dreams of that orchard, of gunfire echoing off metal walls, of Layla's terrified voice. He wakes drenched in sweat, an ache radiating through his old bones. But then he hears Ethan's soft breathing down the hall, sees the faint glow of a nightlight, and remembers Layla's phone calls from college, excitedly sharing a new course she's taken or a friend she's made. He exhales, letting the tension drain. He did what he had to do. One evening, after a long day of ranch work, Malcolm sets up a modest camera on a tripod, pointed at the front porch. He's decided, after all this, to record a message. A warning, a story, maybe even a kind of testimony. He presses record and speaks into the camera, voice steady, though his eyes carry the weight of his years. "When evil comes knocking at your door," he says quietly, "you have a choice, to kneel or to stand. I made my choice. I stood for my family. I'd do it again in a heartbeat." He talks about the lengths a person will go to protect what matters most. He doesn't name the cartel or elaborate on the violence, but the shadows in his eyes convey the truth. It wasn't easy, and it left scars no amount of time can fully heal. Still, he ends with a faint, genuine smile. "Family is worth fighting for," he concludes. "And if you agree, then you already know the power of love that drives an old man like me to keep going." He stops recording, letting the desert hush settle around him. Ethan comes out, glancing at the camera, curiosity in his expression. "Grandpa, were you making a video?" Malcolm chuckles softly. "Yeah, just a little something to remind folks that we're stronger than we think when we fight for the ones we love." Ethan grins. "You're the strongest person I know," he says, sincerity shining in his eyes. Malcolm ruffles his hair, feeling a swell of affection. Time moves on. Layla visits on holidays, each time a bit more confident, hugging Ethan tight and talking for hours with Malcolm on the porch about everything she's learning. She seems freer, though the shadows in her eyes haven't vanished completely. She's found new purpose, volunteering at a crisis center in the city, helping others who've faced violence. "I can't turn away now that I know how cruel people can be," she tells Malcolm. He nods, pride mingling with concern. "Just be careful," he says. She smiles. "Careful's my middle name these days." They gather at the dinner table for a belated Thanksgiving once, all three Rosses plus Cole. It feels like a family reborn, still a little battered but intact. Over pie, Ethan chatters about his big plans for the ranch, Layla teases him good-naturedly, and Malcolm sits back, content to watch them, feeling that rare, warm glow of gratitude. In the quiet of the aftermath, Malcolm sometimes wonders if another threat might emerge, if another gang or vengeful lieutenant might track them down. But he refuses to live in fear. He keeps the weapons locked in the basement, well-maintained but out of sight. He teaches Ethan about humility and the importance of readiness. He calls Layla weekly, checking on her life in the bustling city. And he remains at the ranch, the place he's called home for decades, forging ahead with each sunrise and sunset. Because he's learned a truth that transcends fear. So long as he draws breath, he will defend this patch of land, this family, and the fragile peace they've fought to reclaim. That promise stands at the heart of who he is. And in that promise lies the unyielding love that carried him through firefights and orchard fences, the bond that pulled Layla out of captivity and back into the circle of family. It's a testament to resilience, and to the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, an old man who refuses to kneel before evil can make all the difference in the world. Thank you for watching until the end. If you believed in Malcolm's fight for family, or if you've ever stood up to protect what matters, don't forget to hit that like button. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want more stories of courage and the ties that bind us. Until next time, stay safe, and remember the power you hold when you stand up for those you love.